This is about the basic wiring of your brand new JK BMS and also how to set up and configure it in the application. Hi folks, I'm Roger from Offgrid Power Solutions, and in this episode I'm going to take you through the very basics of connecting your brand new JK BMS to your cells and show you how you get up and running the essentials that you need to know for the app. So when you buy your BMS, it has these 6mm sockets here that you can screw things into, these terminals, and everything other than the temperature probe will be unplugged. So let me take you through step by step everything that you will need to do and need to know. I'm going to first talk about what you connect these to. So this is the B- and the P-. We've had a few cases where people have connected, for example, B- to the main negative terminal and P- to the main positive terminal. So I think the P has confused things, even though there's the minus there. When you do that and you turn it on, there's going to be a lot of sparks and potentially fire and that sort of stuff. So we've had a few BMSs that have pretty much melted down when those mistakes have been made. So I'm just explaining this very carefully because this is the most critical part. What you'll want to do when you first get this is to connect your B- to the battery main negative terminal. And you will need to use two wires because there are 2 points in this terminal here, and they do it just so that it can carry more current. And in this demo, I've used 10mm wire, but actually you want something like 16mm wire. So you'll want 2 16mm wires, or 10mm might do it if your amperage that you're going to draw is not that heavy. But essentially, you're going to want to have these 2 cables with the 6mm lugs on them, going onto whatever cable you've chosen. And these need to be quite tight. So we've gone from 2 separate ones coming down onto the same negative terminal. And depending on the cells that you bought, you may have multiple things on your terminal. You want each of these to be somewhere between 8 and 10 Newton meters. On recent batteries that we've tested to see heat generation, we've discovered that going right up to 10 Newton meters on this, it's pretty tight. You get a bit nervous that you're going to strip something, but actually at 10 Newton meters, the heat buildup here is negligible. That's very comfortable. So this goes to your battery main negative terminal. This will go off to your power for your RV or boat or cottage or whatever it is. And probably this would go directly to a smart shunt or some sort of Coulomb counter. And then it'll go to your main negative bus bar. So you're not going to put the shunt after the bus bar. It's going to sit, your shunt must sit between this and the bus bar somewhere so that you can count the coulombs properly if you have a smart shunt. Not everybody has one. The on-off switch, when you first get this, the switch won't be in, so it'll come like that. And you just need to make sure you put this in the right way. The switch goes pretty much in the middle. Different models will have different places, but the switch can only go in at one place. So get that in, because you will need, well, you can turn these on in other ways, but the switch makes it a lot easier and you can see when it's on. Unfortunately, a fairly short cable that they supply with this, which is a pity. I would have liked this to be about 4 times longer than this is, but we can live with this. So the other thing to note will be your 2 temperature probes. So these, they do actually give us quite a long temperature probe. And these, you're going to want to put, so what we would do is we would tape one of the probes onto this cell and the other onto that cell, or you can choose any cell you want in your pack. But you generally are going to want to put these probes on the cells because you're protecting the cells. There are other temperature probes in the BMS, so you don't need to worry about if the MOSFETs get hot and you want to protect it. They have their own temperature sensor in the BMS, so you don't need to put these onto anywhere but the cells. You want to protect the cells especially from freezing temperatures and stop it charging. Now let's talk about the cables. There is something very specific that you need to know and that you need to do. So stick with me and we'll go through it. So the black cable is obviously going on to your battery main negative terminal, shares with these cables here. The balance lead number 1, so B1 as they call it, is the one closest to the black, and that goes on to this cell, which is the same as your battery main negative terminal that goes onto the positive side here. It actually, you can put it on either side of this bus bar. It doesn't matter because the bus bar carries the current nicely. Just to show you exactly where it should go, we've left it on the main positive terminal. So that's B1. B2, the second wire from the black, would obviously go to your next cell, to the positive terminal on your next cell. B3 onto the third one, and finally the fourth one, so B4, which is this one here, coming all the way around to your battery main positive terminal. So this is a 4-cell, and so we only need we need 4 red wires plus the last one, which I'll cover shortly. Now, what we've done here, if you can see clearly in the camera, balance-wise, B5, 6, 7, and 8, we've just left off to one side. So if you've got a 4-cell battery, feel free to cut these off. If you have got an 8-cell battery, you will need to use these. So you can either cut these or just leave them out of the way. If you think you might ever upgrade to 24 volts, then just leave them in place. Otherwise, just cut 5, 6, 7, and 8 off. But here's the really, really important part, and this catches a lot of people. You'll notice that there are 9 red wires. So B1 to B8, and then this they call the B plus. So this one here, the black one, is the B minus, and this one is the B plus. So this must go onto your final cell, the one furthest from the battery main negative terminal, and this goes onto the battery main positive terminal. So it's sharing, in this particular case, this B plus wire, the 9th wire, is sharing the same terminal as B4, the 4th wire from the black. So they bolted together onto this terminal. So that's how you do it. And a lot of people actually make this mistake. We've seen cases where this wire has been cut, this 9th wire has been cut, and they realize they need it, and there's like 2 millimeters sticking out that they can solder something onto, which does work, but you really want to, by preference, keep these intact. Just a very quick explanation on cutting these balance leads. There is this misconception out there that they all have to be equal length. I don't know who started that rumor. Absolute rubbish. All they do is measure the voltage on these cells, and when they need to, they will then transfer current from one cell to another as part of the balancing process. So we cut these leads so that we have a nicely, neatly arranged battery, and feel free to do the same. So you can cut them, you can extend them within reason, not more than, say, 0.5 meter or so, because they are fairly thin and they'll be carrying 2 amps when they're doing the balancing. I think that's everything on that. And then when you are ready, so when everything is wired up, and preferably not before, you can then actually place the balance lead, plug it into the BMS. Now, everything is plugged in, everything is wired up, everything is ready to go. And if we measure, so if I find my trusty old multimeter, this is just a really cheap multimeter, but it works fine. If I actually measure what is going on here, so measure on the main positive terminal to here, you'll see it's sort of 1 volt, no volts, whatever. This should be about 13 or 14, so 13.25. But there's nothing here yet, and that's because this is not yet turned on, and it hasn't enabled discharge yet. With these switches, one thing I like about the JKs is that this is an on and an off switch. So on, you can see it glows red. You can hear the BMS beeping away to show that it's come on, and after a short while it actually does turn on. If I measure the voltage here, it will still show 0 volts because it has not allowed discharge yet. As I said, one of the things I like is that you can turn it off. So you hold down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, release, and you can see it goes off. So really handy that you can actually turn the battery on and off with the switch that you'll mount somewhere that you can get to. We're going to run you through the app. Everything is plugged in, everything is switched on, everything theoretically is working. We're now going to connect to it via the app and make sure that everything is running properly. So this is the app here with a little blue cloud with JK BMS and some Chinese writing there. So click on that. And this is what it starts off as. It shows a device list with nothing on it yet. And you see this big green button at the bottom called scan. So let's scan it. So it has found this BMS that we've just connected now. So it's called, the number is, and for this model, the number will be identical. The serial number will be different, but the actual thing shown on the device list is always the same. So it's B2A, so basically that's saying it's balancing at 2 amps. It's an 8S, so it's 4S or 8S, so up to 8S, and it's 20P, which means that it's 200 amps. So 20P, 20 times 10, 200 amp BMS. So that number actually does tell you something. So you click on that, and that brings you then, you hear a few beeps there, and this brings you to the status. You can see some warnings there. It's showing you an overall voltage. It's showing you on the top bar that charge is off, discharge is off, and balance is off. So on the top left side, you see these 3 lines. This is for a menu. So let's click on the 3 lines. And that brings us to the device list. And you can see the device that you have been working on is shown there. And to the right of it is a little pencil so that you can edit something. So let's click on the pencil. And we can do 2 things here. We can modify the name of this, which we'll do shortly, and we can modify the password. I'm not yet going to modify the password, but I would recommend that you do. This is because if somebody was walking around in an RV park or a caravan park or a boat marina or something like that, looking to see what devices they can connect to, they could actually change a lot of things and really destroy your battery if they were malicious. So don't do that if you're watching this. Rather go and notify somebody that they've left the default password on their BMS and suggest that they change it. But here you can change the password to something that would be for you. But what we will do is we will modify the name. So I'm clicking on modify name, and that then shows the same name that would be for all BMSs of this model. So let's go back through it. And we've got a Fred 1, so I will change this to Fred 2, Fred 2, and OK. And device name modified, please restart software. I'm actually going to turn this off. And then turn it back on. And then rescan, and you can see now it's Fred 02. So you have to actually turn this off and back on again for the new name to take place. So that's handy. You can name your BMS so that you will not get confused with other people. This is really handy for that feature that JK have given us, because if you have multiple batteries, logically you're going to want to name them, according to where they are, the location, the number, whatever. And if you're in a place where there are multiple JK BMS, it'd be handy not to get mixed up with everybody else's and have to remember your particular one. So if we go into Fred 2, we are still on this status screen, and as you can see we still have this error message. So we are going to go into the basic setup of this BMS, and as you can see on the top, the charge is off, discharge is off, and balance is off. That's fine. We'll turn all those on later. What I'm going to do right away is to set our basic parameters, and then we'll come back to the status screen and I'll just explain everything of importance on the status screen. So if we go to settings, you can either swipe left or right, or you can just go to settings. Now, the first thing you will need to do is, in order to make any change, is to verify the password. So we click on verify password, and the default password is, guess, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You click on verify. That's now changed to modify password, and you've got the 3 types of batteries that you could choose from. We could now choose lithium iron phosphate, so let's just click on lithium iron phosphate. Just a word on this now. Once you have configured everything and set everything up, don't ever click these 3 buttons again, these LivePure for lithium ion or LTO. The reason for it is that whatever parameters you've set, those will reset back to factory defaults. So you don't really want to do that unless you've made such a mistake and such a hash of setting things up that you want to go back to basics. So we will, in our case, we will never hit the LivePure 4 button again. But here, there are a few things that are incorrect. So let's go to the cell count, and let's change that to 4. We click OK. These are, I think, 280 amp hour cells. I can't actually remember, but they're just cheap demo cells. They're not our usual ones. Okay. So we've told it how many cells we have, the capacity. Now, the balance trigger voltage is a bit of a misleading description, but basically what it is that when the delta exceeds this value, balancing will start. So when I say delta, the delta is the difference in voltage between the highest voltage cell and the lowest voltage cell. So that is the balance trigger voltage when that delta between the highest and the lowest cell exceeds 0.01 volts, it will start balancing and bring them back up to the exact same level. You have 2 calibration entities here. You've got your volts and your amps. So, and this is so that if the BMS is reporting the voltage incorrectly, you can then tell this thing what the real voltage is that's coming out. Let's just talk about the calibration very briefly. Now, we've seen if you have like multiple items measuring voltage and amperage and all that sort of stuff, each one tells a different story. So in my own camper van, I've got the BMS. It's currently a daily, but I'm going to change to JK. It's a daily BMS, and I then hook up to a Victron smart shunt, and from there I'm hook up to a Juntech smart shunt because I'm comparing the two. So I have 3 items that tell me different voltages and different amperages and different states of charge and that sort of thing. And each 3 tells a different story. So basically, and this is one of the biggest support issues that we have. We have guys coming back to us saying, well, the battery's saying this voltage, but actually when I put my multimeter on, it's not that, it's something different. My advice, treat this with a pinch of salt. The most important thing you want this thing to do is to balance and to protect the cells from high voltage and low voltage. And that's it, really. My recommendation, don't use your BMS as your final version of the truth of state of charge and current and everything else. Rather use something like a Victron Smart Shunt or a Juntech or whatever you want to use. Right, coming back to this, the calibrating volts, if you want it to say exactly what your multimeter has read, you can change it, and same with the current. But bear in mind, this does not, the BMS does not take into account the Peuchet effect. So if you are wanting it to be accurate at a low amperage, that's fine, you can set it. If you want it to be accurate at a higher amperage, that's fine, you can set it, but it probably then won't be vice versa. Right, so these are the essentials that you would need right at the start, but I'm going to go onto advanced settings, and I'm going to just cover, I'm not going to cover all of these that we are doing in a separate video, which is a more advanced one, but what I am going to tell you are the very basics of things that you might want to change here. So let's scroll this up. You've got 4 parameters at the top here. Your cell over voltage protection, the reset value, The fourth one is the under voltage protection and the reset value. So the reset values are in the middle. So these you may want to change, but actually these defaults are fine. So if you definitely want to charge at 14.6 volts, then you will need to change your cell over voltage protection to 3.65 to make up the 14.6 volts. But yeah, you do whatever you want in these. So those first four are to protect your cells from over voltage and under voltage. Over voltage when you're charging, under voltage when you're discharging. The rest, the other one that I would highly recommend that you change would be your current. So I'm just looking for that. Okay, there at the top of the screen, your continued charge current default is 25 amps, and most people's systems put out more than 25 amps. So whatever your system is capable of, if you want, just set it to 100 amps or 150 amps or whatever. Not really much problem there unless you've got an unstable charging system. So if you know how much your system can put out, and the problem is a lot of people are not exactly sure because they have a DC-DC or a battery-to-battery plus the solar running at the same time, and they're not sure exactly how much. So I know in my van, I never charge it higher than 100 amps. So I will change that from 25 to 100. The continued discharge is set at 200. That's fine. You can just leave it at that or change it to what you want. Now, the other parameter that I would change, for me personally, is this charge under temperature protect and the reset value. They set it to minus 20 degrees centigrade, which I don't understand, to be honest. I love JK, but they're the same as many other BMS manufacturers in that they set these very low temperatures, which is crazy because if you charge your cells at minus 20, you will damage them. Life PO4 will be damaged at minus 20. So what we do is we set these to about 5 degrees. So the UTP we set to 5 degrees, and the UTPR, so the reset, we set to a few degrees above that. So probably 8 or so degrees. And so what that would do, I'll explain this a little bit because it's important to understand. What that would do is that if the temperature drops and drops and drops and you hit 5 degrees centigrade, it stops allowing charge to protect the cells. But then the temperature needs to rise to, say, 8. If you set the UTPR at 8, the temperature needs to rise to 8 before it allows charge again. That's quite handy because if things have got really cold inside here, just because the probes that are sitting on the top and probably taped to the top are saying that it's safe to charge now, the internal temperature right in the middle of the cell might actually still be too low to accept any reasonable charge. And you might think that the pack is warm enough, but actually right deep inside it's still too cold. So those are to my mind, those are the absolute essentials. Just a quick word on the MOS over temperature protect and the reset. You can see there's no OK next to them, so they cannot be changed. They're 100 degrees centigrade and 80 degrees centigrade respectively. Those are all of the items that I would change in the settings for me. So I want to show you through the status screen now. Very briefly, and then we'll go to the control and turn it on. The status, I think the top section is, I don't need to explain that, except that the cell volt diff obviously is the delta between the highest and lowest cell, in case you're wondering. Everything else, to my mind, seems to be quite basic and fine. There are 2 temperature probes, so that's fine. We're seeing all of that. And the cell voltages are fine. Let me just talk just for a moment about the cell wire resistance. And I've seen several other YouTubes where guys are talking about this and saying they have no idea why this is here. Actually, to me, this is one of the best things in this BMS. I just love seeing the cell wire resistance, because the number of occasions we've had with folk who bought, and not even bought anything from us, they bought a BMS from somebody and they just can't get it to work. And they've come to us for help and support. And mostly, the vast majority of times, it's a balance lead that is not connected properly. The crimp on the terminal isn't good, on the lug isn't good, or something like that. The cell wire resistance will be really handy to show those sort of situations. And here, to be honest, we've got a fairly high range of resistance, but that's fine. So we go from 51 to 57. And that's, I think those are milliohms, so that's fine. If we had one balance lead that was way out, so the crimp was really bad and it's not making contact, etc., you would find that the resistance would be much higher, and that would help you to know where to start looking to debug. This is something lacking in other BMSs like DALI. I just absolutely love it. Right, we are ready now to turn on. So let's go to control. So if we go to the control, you'll see, again, you can modify the password. Here we've got 3 switches we can put on. The balance is already turned on, but it's not going to do anything just yet. And forget about the emergency. The emergency is just when things are really low, but you're desperate. You actually need the battery to run your, something to contact the emergency services or something like that, and it's already very low, but the emergency allows you to override all the safety features and just use the battery. So let's forget about emergency for now. So in order to get something coming out, you will need to deliberately allow charge, and to allow charge coming in, you will need to allow charge and discharge. So if I measure this now, it should not yet be on. So put that onto my main, and there it's still not on. But as soon as I allow discharge, we measure this again, we're on 13.22 volts. And there is going to be a little bit of drop across the MOSFET, so 13.22. If I come here, it's 13.23, so a tiny 13.24, tiny drop, but that's normal because the MOSFETs, the sort of inbuilt smart shunt here needs to drop the voltage in order to measure the current that's flowing out. So that's very normal that you don't get exactly the same voltage coming out of each end. And that has turned everything on, and that is ready to roll. So there you are. So folks, hope you find this useful, and if you bought a JK from us or anybody else, hopefully this video will help you to set it up, all these basics. And for basics, it took longer than I thought, but actually important things. As I said in a different episode, we will take you through the advanced settings and explain every setting in detail. We'll explain the whole, the status screen, the settings, and the control screens, all in a lot of detail, so you can refer back to them. So hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next episode. Cheers.